Good morning, thank you for coming, and welcome to the rather glamorous surroundings of the Princess Ida room at the Savoy Hotel. Also welcome to any of our fans, followers, friends, supporters who are watching this live on Periscope, so welcome to you too. Today is a very exciting day for me and for all of us at New Adventures as we announce our 11th full-length work and my first new production since Sleeping Beauty in 2011. This is a project that's been close to my heart for many years, and the source material was probably my earliest introduction to the weird and wonderful world of ballet. It has also served as inspiration for countless dancers, choreographers and filmmakers for nearly 70 years. I speak, of course, of Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger's legendary 1948 classic, The Red Shoes, starring Maura Shearer as Victoria Page, Marius Goring as Julian Craster, and the great Anton Walbrook as the formidable Boris Lermontov. Based on a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale of the same name, it tells the story of a girl who lives to dance, but whose ambitions become a battleground between the two men who inspire and shape her passion. Set in the glamorously theatrical world of dance, New Adventure's new stage adaptation brings together the same award-winning creative team that brought you our most recent worldwide hit, Sleeping Beauty, which is currently touring the UK and is about to play its 459th performance tonight in Newcastle. My long-term collaborator Les Brotherston will design sets and costumes. Paulie Constable will be lighting designer, and Paul Grutius will be on sound design. And the production will of course be supported by, with our grateful thanks, by our principal funder, Arts Council England. This world premiere production will not be using the original film score by Brian Easdale, but will be set to a new score arranged by another long-standing collaborator, Terry Davis, using the mesmerising music of Golden Age Hollywood film composer Bernard Herrmann. Most famous for his work with Hitchcock, Orson Welles, and latterly Martin Scorsese. An incredible career that spanned Citizen Kane through to Taxi Driver. I've long been an admirer of his work and first fell in love with his music through his classic Hitchcock scores. Most famously, I suppose, is the unforgettable shower scene from Psycho and the achingly romantic score to Hitch's greatest film, Vertigo. However, I will not be using any of his work for Hitchcock, but many of his earlier film scores and concert pieces. Research has unearthed a treasure trove of brilliantly dramatic and moving scores, such as the beautiful score to the film The Ghost of Mrs. Muir, which you may have heard as you came in. And who knew that Citizen Kane was full of brilliant dance music? Much of this music will never have been danced to before or heard in a theatre, and I'm very grateful to the Herrmann estate and Mrs. Herrmann for their support and enthusiasm for this project. So why the Red Shoes? One of the things that has drawn me to this project is that it is set in the theatrical world of a touring dance company. It's actually about dance and dancers, a world that we all at New Adventures understand so well. However, the film's genius is to make that theatrical world at times surreal, larger than life and highly cinematic. My challenge will be to capture some of that surreal, sensuous quality within the more natural theatre setting. I'm also interested in exploring how the seemingly fairy tale world of a dance company and the stories it tells can actually blend into the real life tale of love, ambition and artistic and personal fulfillment until the two are barely distinguishable. Today's culture seems very interested in what it takes to become a great performer or artist. X Factor, the movie Black Swan, which is probably very influenced by the Red Shoes, even Strictly Come Dancing. And indeed our charity Reborn will be drawing on these themes to create a large-scale project for teenagers across the UK to accompany our tour. Audiences also love a backstage story, particularly one that gives insight into the art form. The Red Shoes for me is also, more importantly, a multi-layered love story, the heart of which is the fight between human love and the lure of the highest artistic achievement, overseen by the towering Svengali-like figure of the ballet impresario Boris Lermontov, representing art and the sacrifices it asks us to make. However, for me, it's also about the creative process and the world in which I work. If anything, I intend to make this production my love letter to the theatre. On that rather lofty ambition, I'd like to reveal to you our new poster image that will accompany the production around the country, which is just behind here. So I will now reveal it to you. Yeah. Isn't it beautiful? So, the production will be the centrepiece of New Adventure's 30th anniversary celebrations, which will fall in 2017, when the production is touring throughout the UK. However, the premiere will of course be this year, opening at the Theatre Royal Plymouth and continuing on to the Lowry in Salford before arriving for its gala opening in December for our 15th consecutive Christmas season at Sadler's Wells. Details of further touring will be included in your press releases and on our website. And I'd like to point out now that anyone watching, that Sadler's Wells is on sale from today. And the last time we did a new show at Sadler's Wells, which was Sleeping Beauty, the entire 8-week season was sold out before opening night. So, just saying. Today's a good day to book. Before I open up the floor for questions, if you have any for us, I'd like to introduce you to the young lady who looks so beautiful. That's the centrepiece of our poster campaign. And the dancer will be creating the coveted role of Victoria Page in our production. She's been receiving universal rave reviews every week around the UK for her performance as Aurora in Sleeping Beauty. And we have given her the day off so she can be here this morning. Please say hello to the lovely Ashley Shaw here. Come and join me, Ashley. And we're going to... We're not ready. We're okay about that. We're ready now to answer any questions that you may have for Ashley and myself, so please answer.
Can you just talk a little bit about, can you remember how old you were when you saw the film, and how that, and what your memories of that were?
I was thinking about this yesterday, and I think, I don't remember exactly when I saw it, I think I was a teenager, and at that time I'd never actually seen a ballet. You know, I'd never seen a ballet on stage, so I think it was that's what I said in what I said earlier, I think it was my introduction to that world. And it may have been for a lot of people, this film, you know, maybe their introduction to a world that they know nothing about. And it does seem terribly glamorous and sort of mystical when you watch this film, if it's not a world you're aware of. And I think it was my introduction to that. So it obviously stuck in my head, and you know, it's been a film I've loved ever since. But it was my first ballet, I think, that I saw.
Powell and Pressburg are huge giants of British cinema, fans. Scorsese's a massive fan, but is there a sense with doing this that there's a young generation that maybe don't know enough about the heritage, and are you trying to bring that back as well?
I think so. I realised that when I've mentioned it to people, secretly, you either get a, oh, wow, I love that, amazing, or never heard of it, don't know it. You know, and a lot of young people haven't, of course, seen it, and I always point them in the direction of it. Do see it, you know, it's amazing. But I think we have a bit of educating to do in a way, and to introduce this story. And I hope people will watch the film before they come and see the show, although the show is not going to ape the film in any way. It will be its own piece, you know, in a sense it will be a theatrical work rather than a cinematic one, obviously. but it's I think it's still quite relevant, as I was saying, with the culture that we have at the moment for young people about what it takes to become, the dedication it takes to become a star or a leading performer. And sometimes that hard grind is sort of forgotten about in things like X Factor and etc. So I think it is a relevant story to tell. And certainly, if it makes people watch the film as well, young people, then all the better. Yeah. Hi.
You talked about the ironically sounding Citizen Kane being inspiration. Can you talk me through how that's going to work, and also any other counterintuitive examples of music that you're going to?
Of music?
Yeah.
Well, we're setting the piece at when the film was set, so in like late 40s. And so that's what made me think of Herman's music from earlier films and scores. That's what I started to listen to. I'd long had an ambition to work with his music. I often thought I would do a Hitchcock-inspired piece. But then, because I knew his music well, and this project came up, I just hadn't thought of marrying them together initially, but then it seemed like a perfect fit. And it was partly inspired by the variety of his music that I managed to find, because the story needs to be told on different levels. There's a certain amount of performance in the piece where people are performing in ballets or dance works where it's a performance. There's also a sort of central love story that runs through it, so there's emotional music. And finding someone who had written pieces that would work for both was quite difficult. So the score to The Ghost of Mrs. Muir, for example, is a very, very yearning, bittersweet, emotional story that really lends itself to telling that story in our piece. Whereas Citizen Kane, oddly, has an enormous amount. Luckily, though, I would have to say, Herman did write a suite based on Citizen Kane much later, which is where we're getting a lot of our material from. So little snatches of something that were in the film are expanded into bigger pieces, luckily, because these are the pieces that really work for dance. But it's full of performance stuff. It sounds like a ballet written at that time, which is very interesting. There's also a few concert pieces that we've found, which are very, very good, and I can't believe have not been used for dance before. The other idea we have is which we hope to do, is when we actually go into the Red Shoes Ballet itself, which is the ballet within the piece, that it has a sort of sense of forward-looking creativity about it, something new that they create. And so we're toying with the idea of using a score from a bit later in Herman's career, which creates a different kind of atmosphere, and that's the score from Fahrenheit 451, which is a much later film, but it has a sort of magical quality to it, which is very different to the rest of the piece. So we want to kind of feel musically we've gone into a different world there as well. So it's a great legacy of work to play with, and there's an enormous variety within it. But we're trying to not be too wide in our choices, to try and make it, and Terry Davis's job is to bring it together to sound like a complete score that doesn't got bits and pieces from all over the place in it, that's sort of tied together with themes, and we're trying to limit ourselves to about 4 or 5 scores to make that work.
Do you correct me if I misremembered this, but I seem to remember where in your early days of the company in Swan Lake caused really quite a scandal and sort of shook up the establishment a little bit. I just wondered, so many years on and now you're a sir, congratulations, whether you still feel the need to be a little bit provocative like that, and if so, what in this is going to be raising eyebrows?
Well, I've never felt the need to be provocative, even when I did Swan Lake. It didn't feel that's why I was doing it. It just happened. That's what happened. It felt like a good idea to me at the time. It didn't feel like a provocative idea. And I have had that label, I suppose, over the years. Maybe it's less so now. I don't know. Now it's a bit of establishment. I don't know. But I don't really approach things in that way. What I do approach them, how I do approach work is that I'm often taking something that is very much loved to work with. even the musicals I've done, Mary Poppins and My Fair Lady, Oliver, the ballet, the famous ballets, famous films like Edward Scissorhands and things. These are much loved pieces, you know, and the same with this. But you sort of honour that in a way, but also then try and find a way of creating your own version of it, which is completely different, and an experience that's going to make the people who love the piece also love the show, still love where it came from, and see them as separate entities. So I find it's something I'm used to doing, but it's not in my nature to naturally just go into something and just say, we're just going to recreate this film on stage. It will be different. It will have elements in it that might surprise people. I never know actually what people are going to get upset about. Sometimes it surprises me. You know, you don't know until you do it, in a way, and people sort of, oh, there wasn't enough of this in it, or there wasn't that, or, you know, that sort of thing. I don't think about that when I'm making the work. I let people react to it afterwards.
Just going back very quickly to the music, how will that be kind of woven and performed in the show? Will you be recording it beforehand, or will there be a live orchestra?
Well, this time, because it's a new score that we're putting together, we are performing it live for the first 3 venues. So it will be this year. It will be live because we will need to work on it. We will need to make changes, and we can't re-record it prior to rehearsals. Really, it's just not going to work that way. So we will have it live at Sad as well as live at Plymouth and the Lowry, and then we will record it probably in January for the rest of our tour. So it's exciting that we can be flexible with that, and it's very exciting to have it live this year. Wonderful. We don't always get that opportunity, but it's lovely to have it this time, and I think it will work very well for this piece as well. Hello.
It's actually going to direct.
I mean, I'd be willing to. But no, I'm wearing a lovely wig that I think is in the poster. I'm still wearing that.
Is it? They will be red in the...
It's red tinged, actually. I think under the lights it'll look much better, but it does there.
Yeah, we couldn't resist. Les was a little bit reticent, I have to say, in a way. Why does it have to be red hair? You know, if that was Maura Shearer's, you know, I was thinking, I don't know. We couldn't resist doing it. Too iconic. Baz, hi.
Yeah, hi. Just for Ashley, did you grow up sort of watching the Red Shoes? Because, you know, I know one sort of speaks about young dancers, and they all say, I watched the Red Shoes when I was a young girl. Is that one of your things as well?
Yeah, I saw it when I was quite young, and I loved it, but I must admit, going back, once I learned that I was doing this show and watching it again, you kind of see a different film than when you were little, so it's quite amazing to think that I did watch it and now I'll be playing that part. It's very exciting. So yeah, I've watched it a few times recently to get inspiration.
You have to stop watching it soon.
Yeah. But yeah, I remember being young and watching it, so I'm really excited.
Anyone else?
Sorry, can I ask the other question? Is it going to be a mixture of dialogue and dance, or how are you taking the original script, or actually are you going to be acting in it? How does it work?
Yeah, no, it's a pure dance piece.
Right.
Yeah. In a way, that's what makes the pieces completely different, because you're working in a different medium. So they have to... some of the things that dictate how you tell the story are to do with that. How can we say this? We've already workshopped the piece. Last week we were workshopping the piece, and sometimes you come up against a question like, how can we say that? And we have to think of a different way of doing it. So that's often what dictates changes from the film or the story of the film and how we tell that story. But it's one of I suppose it's one of the missions of the company now, having recreated quite a lot of the famous ballets, is to create new ones, you know, create new titles, because we're sort of running out really of the big old war horses to do, you know, and there's no more Tchaikovsky ballets to do, I'm afraid, sadly. And it is the challenge of finding a great story that lends itself to dance, and great music to accompany it, which is such a big part of what we do as well. I think is that, if you're in a Tchaikovsky ballet, one of the reasons that the public who come to it every week, who aren't so familiar with classical ballet, I mean, 90% of our audience are not ballet fans. They just come and see our shows, and they just fall in love with this music. The Tchaikovsky music is something that they've not heard a lot, and they're overwhelmed by it. And for me, in finding new music to create a piece like we are here, I want that to happen with this music as well. And I think people will fall in love with it. The music, it gets inside you, doesn't it? It's a bit like the score of when we did Cinderella, which is a score that sort of grows on you. You have to hear it a few times. And by the time you begin, it's quite difficult music to work with. And then by the end, it's inside you and you're loving it. And the same for this score, I think. The Hermes music gets inside you. It really, you can't get it out of your head. And that's the sort of music that works for our audiences, I think.
I don't suppose you know how often the Red Shoes has been picked up since the films do on stage or in their interpretation.
Well, there's famously a musical by Julie Stein, which is who did Gypsy. It's a funny girl. It was his last musical that he wrote when he was quite old. Roger Rees played Lermontov on Broadway. It lasted about a week. It was a complete disaster. I think the choreographer was, I want to say La Lubavitch, am I right? Does anyone here know? Come on, dance experts, yes.
I'm not that. But I saw the show.
Oh, you did see it. And there's some of it's on YouTube actually. There's some clips of it on YouTube. It looks a little cold to me when I watch it, but that was the only time that I know of. I think it's been adapted as a fairy tale. Hans Andersen's been adapted. I think didn't Emma Rice do it? And Ehi have done that version of it. But it's just based on the fairy tale. Of course, the Red Shoes is the tale within the tale. So that has been done a few times. But I don't think it's been done in this way. But I might be wrong. I think the ballet of the film has been recreated madly on stage, which is not a good idea, I don't think, in a way, because it's such a piece of cinema. But I think this is the first time it's been done in this way.
Quite a low bar to beat 1 week.
Is it? Do you see this being a risk in any way? Is there a danger that if people won't have the same appetite for it that you do?
Is this a risk? Yeah, well, everything's a risk, actually. I think who knows what's successful these days? It's very difficult to tell, isn't it? Sometimes things, they get very well reviewed, no one wants to see. Sometimes pieces that are not so well reviewed that you can't get a ticket for. You don't really know in the end what's going to be successful. So there's always a risk with everything. I think the risk with this is it's not so well known. I do think when you're touring a production called Sleeping Beauty or Cinderella, you do sell out. You're more likely to sell out than if you're touring a piece that people have not heard of so much. It does sell those extra tickets. It's the title. Very, very important. In this country still, the audiences want something they already know of it. And we're also dealing with a composer that people might not have heard of. They don't think, oh, I love that music. At least I'll know the music. So it's our job now to try and introduce people to the world of the film, the story, the music. And it will be harder for us. It'll be a harder sell in some ways for us. But we believe in it. So we believe we have something to share with audiences, which is really fantastic, I think, in terms of the source material and the music. I'm not saying the piece is fantastic, I haven't done it yet. Don't quote me on that, but I think we have great things to share. Yeah. Right.
Lermontov is obviously a key role. Do you see it as a dancing role or a character role? You're not interested in coming back to the stage in a real life imitation?
No. Trust you. It's one of the things we were talking about last week, isn't it? We were working mainly with principal characters last week. in our workshops, we just had Julian and Vicky and Lermontov. And of course, Vicky is a dancer, so she can dance. And there are lots of opportunities for her to dance. Julian is a composer, so in some ways he has a physicality about him with the piano, he can conduct. They have a love story, so that's duets kind of work. Physicality is all there. It sort of makes sense. Lermontov is much more difficult because he's powerful by his stillness in many ways and the sort of ominous presence he has. So we discussed that a lot, and we tried to tease out some movement out of him last week in a way as a character, and we did manage to do it. And it's all about the context, and you use your judgment, I suppose, on where that will work. He's not going to come out dancing across the stage, you know, as a character, but he will have his moments. Usually when he's on his own, or when he's with Vicky on her own, maybe. We toyed with the idea of making him a choreographer as well as a ballet director, because that again lends itself to being able to move more in a way. But we feel we want to stick with the character he is in the film. It kind of changes him too much if he's that creative person, because he lives through other creative people. I think that's the character.
And Anton Walbrook was kind of the Diaghilev in the film, wasn't he? So
very much so, yeah. I mean, it's based loosely based on the Diaghilev and Nijinsky story, except that Nijinsky becomes a female character. And yes, I do. I mean, I'm not going to be playing the role.
You've given us hope there for a while.
It's not me. But I do. It's interesting you mention that, because I have found myself agreeing with him quite a lot, even though he's quite severe. I do kind of agree a lot what he says. I'm going, I kind of go along with that a little bit. So I mean, he's a brilliant character, and I said to one, that's who everyone's going to want to know about, you know, Vicky and Boris. I think they're the characters that intrigue people. Yes.
I think they need to do much updating for it to suit the modern day, because presumably dancers now can be in that career.
Oh, you say that. That's what sometimes I'm not agreeing with. Of course they can, yes. Of course they can have a career and a life as well. So, no, I mean, the story has to be about someone who can't deal with that. I'm not saying other people can't deal with it. She can't deal with it. That if she can deal with it, we don't really have a story, in a way. So that the dilemma is the pull of her career and her first love, really, which is dancing. And the fact that she can only be the best dancer in the best company. Because this is supposedly in the story the world's greatest dance company, you know, and once she's left that company, the work isn't so good, so she can't be her true self or achieve her ambition. So she eventually does leave Julian, actually, eventually, to come back to the company, and he comes after her, you know. So she does make a decision at some point. And we've thought about how their love affair is created through art, in a way, through them working on this piece together. We think they don't really get on very well to begin with, and which is sort of what happens in the film. They argue a lot. They're not sort of. They're very much about his music, her dancing, and it's the madness of bringing a piece together and the success of that piece that brings them together. And when they don't have that, it doesn't although there's a love there, it doesn't quite work anymore. It's not as exciting, and she needs that sort of fulfillment that she can't get. So she goes back to the company. Then she can't really deal with it. For those of you who don't know, there is a sad ending. Yeah, that's the story. And it's quite an interesting one, actually, for dancers to think about and to deal with and to discuss, you know. I think everyone can identify with it, even if they don't believe in it, that concept that Lermontov states. You can't have, you know, you can't be a great artist and have a love life distracting you from that. I think everyone can feel it, but they're not necessarily going to agree with it in this profession. No? Good. Lovely. Thank you very much for being here. If anyone wants to speak with us individually, we're very happy to. Or photos or anything. Absolutely. But thank you all very much for coming. Pleasure. Thank you.